The silence of deep space was not truly silent. To Jace, who had spent the last 15 years drifting between stars, it was a texture, a low-frequency hum of recyclers, gravity stabilizers, and the rhythmic pulse of the ion drives. It was the sound of safety. It was the sound of boredom. And right now, boredom was exactly what he needed. He sat in the pilot's seat of the rusty Starling, a hauler-class transport that had seen better decades. His boots were propped up on the console, right next to a magnetic chessboard where the pieces had not moved in 3 days. Jace rubbed a hand over his face, feeling the scratch of stubble he had been too tired to shave. The dark circles under his eyes felt heavy enough to have their own gravitational pull. "Daddy, look." The voice came from the co-pilot seat, which was far too large for its occupant. Leo, 7 years old and currently wearing a cape made from a thermal blanket, was pointing at the viewport. Jace dropped his boots to the deck and leaned forward, squinting. "It is just a nebula. Buddy, we saw it yesterday. It is the same one." "It changed shape," Leo insisted, his small finger smearing a smudge on the reinforced glass. "It looks like a dragon now. Before it looked like a potato." Jace chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. He reached over and ruffled the boy's hair. "Everything looks like a potato if you are hungry enough. Did you finish your nutrient pack?" Leo wrinkled his nose. "It tastes like wet cardboard." "That is the flavor of champions," Jace said, turning back to the navigation monitors. He checked the readouts. They were hauling 10 tons of hydroponic seeds and water filtration units to a colony in the outer rim. It was non-lethal, non-glamorous, and paid just enough to keep fuel in the tank and the cardboard-flavored food on the table. It was a far cry from his days flying interceptors in the Terran Coalition. But that life belonged to a different man. That man had a wife. That man had a future that did not involve haggling over docking fees. This version of Jace only cared about one thing. He glanced at Leo, who was now making his action figure battle the invisible dragon in the nebula. "I am not enough for him," Jace thought, the familiar guilt tightening in his chest like a cold fist. He should be in a school on Mars. He should have friends. He should have a mother. Warning, gravitational shear detected. The ship's computer voice, usually a calm alto, cut through the quiet. The lights on the dashboard flickered from a soothing amber to a harsh, flashing red. Jace sat up straight, his hands flying across the controls. The Starling shuddered, a metallic groan vibrating through the hull. "Leo, strap in, now!" The urgency in his voice made the boy drop his toy. Leo scrambled with the buckles of the oversized seat. "What is it, Daddy?" "I do not know," Jace muttered, eyes scanning the scrolling data. The sensors were screaming. Space ahead of them was not empty. It was bending. A gravitational anomaly, invisible and uncharted, had just opened its maw directly in their flight path. The stars outside the viewport, usually fixed points of light, began to smear into long, terrified streaks of white. "Hang on!" Jace shouted. The ship pitched violently downward, though there was no down in space. The artificial gravity failed, then surged back at double strength, pinning Jace to his chair. The hull screamed as the anomaly grabbed them. It was not just pulling them, it was chewing on them. Alarms blared, a cacophony of shrieks that drowned out Leo's cry of fear. Sparks showered from the overhead panel. "Shields are gone," Jace yelled, though he knew Leo could not understand the technicality of their doom. "Stabilizers are offline." Through the viewport, the nebula vanished. In its place, a planet rushed up to meet them, a swirling marble of violet and green, surrounded by 2 pale, sickly moons. They were falling, Fast. Jace fought the yoke, his muscles straining as the G-force tried to crush his ribs. The starling was breaking apart. He could hear the structural supports snapping like dry twigs. Computer, initiate emergency protocol. Jace roared. Eject the cargo, redirect all power to structural integrity. Unable to comply, the computer replied, its voice distorting. Systems critical. Impact in 20 seconds. 20 seconds. Jace looked at Leo. The boy was crying silently, his hands white-knuckled on the harness. Jace unbuckled. The force of the spin threw him against the console, cracking his head against the metal, but he did not feel it. He scrambled across the tilting deck, grabbing Leo. We are going for a ride. Leo! Just like the simulation, Jace yelled over the roaring wind that was now tearing at the outer hull. He shoved Leo into the single escape pod located behind the cockpit. It was cramped, meant for one survival suit, not a father and child. Jace strapped Leo in, his hands shaking but efficient. He programmed the descent sequence. Daddy, get in! Leo screamed, reaching for him. Jace looked at the pod. There was no room. If he squeezed in, the extra mass might compromise the chutes. If he stayed on the bridge, he was dead. I am right behind you, buddy. Jace lied. The lie tasted like ash. I have to steer the ship so you land safe. I will take the rear pod. There was no rear pod. Jace slammed his hand on the release button. The glass door slid shut, sealing Leo's terrified face away from the chaos. I love you, Jace whispered, though the roar of the atmosphere swallowed his words. The pod blasted away. Jace turned back to the pilot's seat. The heat was unbearable now. Fire was cutting through the floorboards. The violet canopy of an alien rainforest filled the viewport, rushing toward him at terminal velocity. He grabbed the yoke, not to save himself, but to angle the ship's burning carcass away from the pod's trajectory. The trees rose up like spears. Metal shrieked. The world dissolved into fire and darkness. Pain. It was the first thing Jace knew. It was a living thing, heavy and dull, sitting on his chest. He gasped, inhaling smoke and the smell of ozone. He opened his eyes. Above him, the sky was the wrong color. It was a bruised twilight purple, crossed by bands of shimmering energy that hummed like high-tension wires. 2 moons hung low on the horizon, one crescent and white, the other full and blood-red. He was alive. Jace coughed, rolling onto his side. He was lying in a bed of crushed vegetation. The leaves were massive, violet and oily, smelling of cinnamon and rot. Around him, the wreckage of the starling was scattered like the bones of a great beast. The cockpit was sheared in half, embedded in the soft, mossy earth. Leo. The name galvanized him. Jace pushed himself up. His flight suit was torn at the shoulder, revealing a nasty burn, and his left leg throbbed with a deep bruise. But nothing seemed broken. Leo, he croaked. He scrambled over a burning piece of fuselage. The forest around him was bioluminescent. Faint, glowing spores drifted through the air like lazy embers, sticking to his skin. The trees towered hundreds of feet high, their bark looking like wet muscle. He found the pod 300 yards away, smashed through a canopy of fern-like plants. It was cracked. Jace's heart stopped. He sprinted, ignoring the pain in his leg. He ripped the warp door off its hinges with a strength born of pure panic. Empty. No, 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 Jace muttered. He spun around, scanning the dense alien undergrowth. Leo! Daddy? The small voice came from behind a cluster of glowing blue mushrooms. Jace dropped to his knees as Leo emerged, trembling, clutching his thermal cape. Jace pulled the boy into his arms, burying his face in Leo's dusty hair. The relief was so intense it made him dizzy. Are you hurt? Jace asked, pulling back to check him. Arms, legs, head, a few scrapes, a bruise on his cheek, but whole. I was scared. Leo whispered, "The bugs are singing. Daddy, it sounds scary." Jace listened. The forest was alive with a chorus of insect noise, a rhythmic metallic grinding sound that echoed from all directions. It sounded like 1,000 knives being sharpened at once. "It is just crickets." "Leo, big ugly space crickets," Jace said, forcing a smile he did not feel. He stood up, keeping Leo close. He reached for the emergency survival kit on his belt. It was gone. His weapon was gone. His comms unit was smashed. They were alone on a forbidden world with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Movement. It was subtle, a shift in the light. Jace spun around, pushing Leo behind him. Out of the violet shadows they emerged. They were tall, nearly 7 feet, and humanoid, but distinctly not human. Their skin was pale gray, almost translucent, revealing faint veins of blue light pulsing beneath. They wore armor that looked organic, like plates of hardened beetle shell, iridescent and shifting color with the light. Their eyes were large, luminous, and lacked pupils, glowing like burning magnesium. There were 6 of them. Each held a weapon that hummed with a low, menacing energy. A spear tip made of crackling light was pointed directly at Jace's throat. "Easy," Jace said, holding up his empty hands. He tapped the side of his neck, activating the subdermal auto-translator implant he had bought in a bargain bin on Titan Station. It was old and glitchy, but it was all he had. The lead alien stepped forward. It spoke, a series of melodic clicks and sibilant hisses. Jace's implant buzzed, processing the syntax. A moment later, a tinny, synthesized voice whispered in Jace's ear. "The sky intruder is requested to cease vibration. The ground is holy. You have broken the lawn." "Broken the lawn?" Jace blinked. "We crashed," Jace said slowly, enunciating clearly. "My ship. Broken? We mean no harm." The alien tilted its head. The translator whirred again. "He claims the metal bird committed suicide. He offers 0 violence." Jace let out a breathless, hysterical laugh. "Look, tell them we are sorry about the lawn. At least we did not tow the ship and leave a ticket." The alien did not smile. It gestured with the spear. "Silence. Soft skin. You are poison. You will walk to the high stone." They did not wait for agreement. 2 of the warriors moved with fluid, unnatural speed, grabbing Jace's arms. Their grip was like iron. Another reached for Leo. "Don't touch him," Jace snarled, struggling against the grip. The alien ignored him, scooping Leo up as if he weighed nothing. Leo screamed, kicking at the organic armor. "Daddy, I am here. Leo, I am right here," Jace shouted, thrashing against his captors. One of the aliens struck him in the stomach with the butt of its weapon. The wind left Jace's lungs in a rush of pain. He doubled over, gasping as they dragged him forward. The march was a blur of violet leaves and humid heat. Jace stumbled, his eyes fixed on the warrior carrying Leo ahead of him. Every time Leo looked back, terrified, Jace forced himself to nod, to look confident, even as fear ate him alive. The forest eventually gave way, and Jace stopped dead, staring. The city had not been built, it had been grown. Spires of translucent crystal rose from the living bedrock, spiraling upward like twisted glass roots. Bioluminescent vines wove between the structures, pulsing with golden light that acted as street lamps. Platforms hovered in midair without visible propulsion, connecting the towers. It was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly alien. They were led across a bridge of singing stone. The rock actually hummed under their boots toward the largest structure. A palace that looked like a frozen explosion of diamond and amethyst. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of ozone and crushed flowers. They entered a vast antechamber. "Separate the spawn," the leader commanded. Jace's translator caught it clearly this time. "No!" Jace surged forward, the adrenaline overriding his exhaustion. "You keep us together. That is my son." The warriors did not hesitate. They shoved Jace toward a side corridor while the one holding Leo turned toward a set of heavy, ornate doors. "Leo!" Jace screamed, the sound tearing at his throat. "Be brave! Leo, I am coming for you, Daddy!" The doors slammed shut, cutting off his son's voice. Jace fought. He threw an elbow into a warrior's face, hearing a satisfying crunch of cartilage. But there were too many of them. They bore him down, pinning him to the cold floor. Heavy magnetic cuffs were clamped onto his wrists and ankles. "The Regent demands the infiltrator," a warrior hissed. They hauled him up and dragged him through the palace. Jace's mind was racing. He needed a weapon. He needed a map. He needed to kill every single one of them if they hurt a hair on Leo's head. They brought him to the throne room. It was a cavernous hall, the ceiling lost in shadows where banners woven from actual starlight hung suspended. Hovering platforms lined the walls, filled with nobles draped in robes that shifted color like oil on water. They looked down at him with eyes that held centuries of arrogance. At the far end, on a throne carved from a single piece of obsidian, sat the Regent. He was older than the others, his skin like parchment, his armor spiked and cruel. And then, there was the girl. She arrived late. The heavy doors at the side of the hall slid open, and a hush fell over the court, not of respect, but of judgment. She descended on a small floating disc, moving like a living comet. She was breathtaking. Her skin was a deep, iridescent pearl, marked with intricate swirling patterns of gold that seemed to move across her face. Her eyes were pools of liquid light, violet and endless. She was young, barely out of adolescence by her species' standards, but her posture carried a crushing weight. This was Lyra, the princess, the heir. Jace watched her, captivated despite his fear. She did not look at the nobles. She looked straight ahead, her jaw set. He could not know her thoughts, but the tension radiating from her was palpable. She was isolated. He saw the way the nobles whispered behind their hands as she passed. He saw the cold, dismissive sneer on the Regent's face. She was royalty, yet she looked like a prisoner in her own home. Lyra took her place not on the throne, but on a lower seat beside it. She looked tired, haunted. "Bring the filth forward," the Regent commanded. His voice boomed without a microphone. Jace was shoved to his knees in the center of the room. The floor was polished to a mirror shine. He could see his own bloody, dirty reflection staring back. A human. The Regent spat, a scavenger from the dead stars. "You dare violate the sanctuary of the high worlds?" "My ship crashed," Jace said, his voice hoarse. "I have a child. We are not soldiers. We are refugees." "Lies," a counselor on a hovering platform shouted. "Humans are deceivers. He is a spy, a saboteur sent to weaken our defenses before the invasion." "Execute him," another noble cried out. "Mount his head on the spires to warn his kind." The chant began to ripple through the room. Death, death, death. Jace looked up. He scanned the faces, hostile, alien, unyielding. He was going to die here. And Leo would be alone. His gaze landed on Lyra. She was not chanting. She was leaning forward, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair so tightly her knuckles were glowing white. She was looking at him, their eyes locked. It was a connection that defied biology. In that moment, the distance between species vanished. Lyra looked into Jace's eyes and saw the raw, bleeding terror of a parent. She saw the defiance of a man who would burn the galaxy down to save his child. And Jace saw something in her too. He saw fear. He saw a desperate need to break the chains of her own existence. The oracle spoke of a stranger, Elira thought, the memory of the AI's whispers flooding her mind. A catalyst, one who falls from the sky. The regent stood, raising a hand. An executioner stepped out from the shadows, wielding a massive curved blade that hummed with plasma energy. "Let it be done," the regent proclaimed, "for the purity of the empire." The executioner raised the blade. Jace flinched, bracing for the end. "Halt!" The voice was clear, bell-like, and commanding. Elira stood up. Her platform surged forward, cutting off the executioner. She stepped down, placing herself directly between Jace and the falling blade. The hall gasped. It was a sound like wind rushing through a canyon. "Princess!" the regent barked, his face twisting in fury. "Step aside. Do not shame yourself further by defending this vermin." Elira did not move. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. This was madness. She was weak. Everyone said so. She was the soft princess, the one who cried over withered flowers. But looking at the human, at his torn suit, his desperate eyes, she felt a surge of rebellion hot enough to melt stone. "He is not vermin," Elira said, her voice shaking slightly but gaining strength. "He is a father. He is an enemy," the regent roared. "Kill him." The executioner hesitated, looking from the regent to the princess. Elira turned to Jace. She knelt down, ignoring the collective intake of breath from the court. She was close enough that Jace could smell her, a scent like rain on hot stone. She looked at his chest, where his heart beat frantically against his ribs. "I will not let them take you," she whispered, in a language he did not know, but his translator caught the intent. She raised her hand. Her palm was cool and smooth. She pressed it firmly against the center of his chest, over his heart. Jace flinched, confused. "What are you doing?" Elira closed her eyes. The golden markings on her face flared with brilliant light. The bioluminescent veins in her arm pulsed, sending a surge of energy into her palm. Ancient nanotech, dormant in her royal bloodline. "Woke up." She spoke the words. They were old words, a ritual from a time when her people were warriors who bound their greatest treasures to their souls. "A single human father crashed on our soil," she announced, her voice amplified by the room's acoustics. She opened her eyes. They were glowing. From this moment, the translator in Jace's ear buzzed, struggling to convey the weight of the concept, the archaic density of the phrasing. "You are mine forever." The silence that followed was absolute. The regent fell back into his throne, his face pale. The nobles froze. Elira did not pull her hand away. She felt the human's heartbeat synchronize, just for a second, with the pulse of the energy flowing from her hand. She had done the unthinkable. She had invoked the rite of binding. She had just claimed a human infiltrator as her bonded consort, her property, her shield. She looked at Jace, her expression a mix of terrifying resolve and sudden, overwhelming panic at what she had just done. "You are mine," she repeated, the translation echoing in the silent hall. And Jace, kneeling in the dirt of a world he did not understand, bound to a princess he had just met, could only stare in shock as the destiny of two worlds shifted on its axis. The heavy doors of the private chambers slid shut with a hiss that sounded far too much like a snake sealing its burrow. Jace spun around, the adrenaline of the execution platform still coursing through his veins, turning into a sharp, jagged anger. "What was that?" Jace demanded. His voice echoed off the high, vaulted ceilings. "You put a target on my back out there." Elira stood by a tall, narrow window carved from transparent crystal. Outside, the violet twilight of the city cast long, strange shadows across the floor. She did not turn to face him immediately. Her posture was rigid, her hands clasped behind her back in a knot of white-knuckled tension that betrayed the cool, regal mask she wore. "It was necessary," she said, her voice steady but thin. "Necessary." Jace stepped closer, ignoring the two armored guards who tensed by the door. "You claimed me. My translator is cheap, princess, but I know what the word possession means. You told that room full of sharks that I belong to you." Alyra turned then. The iridescent markings on her skin were pulsing with a faint, rapid rhythm, a biological tell he was beginning to recognize as anxiety. "I saved your life, human," she snapped, her eyes flashing. "The regent would have taken your head before the sun set. By invoking the right of binding, I made you untouchable. To harm you now is to strike directly at the heir to the throne." "And what does that mean for me?" Jace asked, crossing his arms. "Am I a slave? A pet?" "You are bonded," Alyra corrected, stepping down from the raised dais. "In the eyes of the court, our fates are tied. If you are harmed, my claim is dishonored, and I look weak. If you betray me, I have the legal right to demand your immediate death. In exchange, you gain the protection of my house, the status of a royal consort, and the resources of the palace." Jace let out a harsh, dry laugh. "So I am a prisoner with a fancy title." "You are alive," Alyra countered, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "Which is more than you were 10 minutes ago." Jace stared at her. He saw the tremor in her hands, the way she held her chin high to compensate for the fact that she was terrified. She had just gambled her entire political future on a stranger, and she was terrified that she had made a mistake. He took a breath, forcing his shoulders to drop. He was a pilot. He knew how to assess a crash landing and salvage what he could. "Fine," Jace said quietly. "I am yours. I will play the part. I will be your guardian, your consort. Whatever you need to keep that guy with the spiky armor away from me. But I have one condition." Alyra tilted her head, surprised by his sudden shift. "Conditions are not typically granted to the bonded. I do not care about your traditions," Jace said, his voice hard. "My son, Leo, he stays with me, not in a separate wing, not in a nursery across the complex. He stays where I can see him. If you want me to protect you, I need to know he is safe." Alyra hesitated. Her gaze drifted to the door where the guard stood. "It is forbidden," she murmured. "The bonded are kept separate from lineage heirs to prevent attachments." Jace took a step forward, invading her personal space just enough to make her look up at him. "Then unbond me," he said. "Send me back to the executioner. Because if you keep him from me, I will burn this palace down from the inside out." Alyra searched his face. She saw the same desperate ferocity she had seen in the throne room. It was not a threat made of malice. It was a fact of nature. She let out a slow breath, the tension in her shoulders breaking. "Very well," she said softly. "I will order the adjoining chambers prepared. He will remain by your side." The transfer to their new quarters was a blur of neon and vertigo. Alyra led Jace and a traumatized but relieved Leo through the inner sanctum of the palace. The architecture was designed to disorient. They walked across bridges made of solid light that hummed under their boots. The gravity shifted subtly as they moved between towers, so that one moment they were walking level, and the next the floor angled 45 degrees upward, yet their feet stuck firmly to the surface. Leo clung to Jace's hand, his eyes wide. "Is the floor sticky?" "Daddy? It is just magnets." "Buddy," Jace lied, though he felt his own stomach lurch. "Just fancy magnets." They passed through a garden that defied all logic. The plants were not merely growing, they were singing. Tall, flute-like reeds vibrated with the wind, creating a low, harmonic chord that seemed to change based on the color of the flowers blooming nearby. The air smelled of ozone and crushed peppermint. Illyra stopped before a massive set of double doors. "These are your quarters," she said. "Mine are directly through that archway." Jace stepped inside and stopped dead. The room was the size of a hangar bay. The walls were lined with flowing silk tapestries that changed scenes as he looked at them. In the center of the room was a sunken pit filled with glowing, star-lit water, fed by steam vents that hissed rhythmically. "Is that the bathtub?" Jace asked, pointing. "It is a thermal cleanser," Illyra explained. "It uses sonic resonance and mineral steam to purify the skin." "Great," Jace muttered. "A screaming bath." He walked over to a table laden with food. It was a spread of colorful gelatinous spheres and strips of meat that looked vaguely blue. He picked up a sphere. It vibrated in his fingers. "Do not eat the purple ones," Illyra warned, watching him with a hint of amusement. "They are meant to be inhaled." Jace dropped the sphere instantly. He looked at his dirty flight suit, then at the elegant flowing robes laid out on a bench. "I assume you do not have any denim in my size," he said. Illyra suppressed a smile. "You must look the part." "Jace, the court watches everything. Tonight, I present you formally. Wash the space dust off. And please, try not to inhale the fruit." The formal presentation was a trial by fire. The great hall was packed with every noble general and influencer in the empire. The air was thick with the scent of burning incense and heavy with hostility. Jace stood beside Illyra's throne, wearing a tunic of dark woven mesh that shimmered like beetle wings. It was uncomfortable, tight across the shoulders, and made him feel like a decorative hood ornament. Leo was seated on a small cushion behind the throne, guarded by two of Illyra's personal elite, clutching a toy spacecraft Jace had salvaged from his pocket. The regent stood in the center of the floor, his voice booming. "This is madness." "Illyra," the regent sneered, not bothering with her title. "You bring a stray animal into the High Council and dress him in silk?" "He is not a stray," Illyra said, her voice projecting clearly without a microphone. Her nervousness from the private chambers was gone, replaced by a mask of cold, imperious authority. "This man is a veteran of the Star Wars. He is a pilot of exceptional skill. The Oracle predicted a guardian from the stars. I have found him." She gestured to Jace. "He is crucial to the defense of this world." She lied smoothly. "His knowledge of outside tactics will reveal threats we cannot see." The regent's eyes narrowed. He looked at Jace with the cold calculation of a butcher eyeing a side of beef. "A human defender," the regent mocked. "Tell me, human, what great weapon do you wield?" Jace stepped forward. He felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on him. He decided to lean into the lie. "I survived the crash that should have vaporized me," Jace said, keeping his voice flat and hard. "I kept my ship together while the sky was tearing apart. If I can do that with a rust bucket freighter, imagine what I can do with your fleet." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. It was not respect, not yet, but it was curiosity. The regent did not smile. He turned to his war council, muttering something that Jace's translator failed to catch, but the tone was unmistakable. "This is not over." Later, in the shadows of a side chamber, the regent met with his generals. "She plays a dangerous game," General Kale hissed, his organic armor clicking as he paced. "A human in the court. The people will riot. Let them," the regent said, staring at a holographic map of the border systems. "We will use him. If the human fails, Illyra looks incompetent. If he succeeds, we will frame him for espionage. We will say he signaled the human fleets to invade. Either way, his presence is the spark I need to ignite the war. The next few days were a blur of training. Illyra was determined to turn Jace from a rough-edged cargo hauler into a passable courtier. "Straighten your spine," she commanded, tapping his back with a rod made of light. "You walk like you are carrying a heavy sack." "Gravity is different here," Jace grumbled, correcting his posture. "And I usually am carrying a heavy sack. It is called a job." They were in a training dojo with floors of polished wood. Illyra moved around him, critical but engaged. "Now, the bow of gratitude," she said. "Show me." Jace sighed and performed the gesture she had shown him earlier, arms crossed, head bowed low, left knee bent. Illyra froze. Then a sound escaped her, a sharp, melodic chime. She was laughing. Jace looked up. "What? What did I do?" "You just proposed marriage to the entire room," Illyra said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "The bow of gratitude requires the right knee. The left knee is an offer of reproductive alliance." Jace scrambled up, his face flushing hot. "Great. Just what I need. Accidental proposals." Illyra was still smiling. It transformed her face, stripping away the heavy layers of royal makeup and isolation. For a moment, she looked like a young woman, not a monument to duty. "You are a disaster, Jace," she said, but the words lacked their usual bite. "I am a quick learner," he retorted, dusting off his knees. "Just keep the knees straight for me." As the training shifted to combat, Illyra watched him. She watched the way he moved, efficient, brutal, devoid of the elegant flourishes her own guards used. He fought to survive, not to perform. She noticed other things, too. She noticed the jagged scar running down his forearm. She noticed the way his hands, rough and calloused, were incredibly gentle when he adjusted Leo's collar or wiped a smudge of dirt from the boy's face. She had never seen a man be gentle. In her world, men were warriors, politicians or statues. Tenderness was a weakness. But when Jace looked at his son, he looked invincible. That night, the nightmare came. Illyra was walking past Jace's quarters on her way to the strategy room when she heard the cry. It was high and thin, the sound of pure terror. She paused, her hand hovering over the door panel. She knew she should keep walking. Privacy was part of the agreement. But something pulled her. The door slid open silently. Inside, the room was dim, lit only by the glowing water of the pool. Jace was sitting on the edge of the bed, Leo curled into his chest, sobbing. "I saw the fire again. Daddy." Leo choked out. The trees were eating the ship. "I know, buddy, I know," Jace murmured, rocking him slowly. His voice was a low rumble, vibration more than sound. "But we are here. The fire is gone. Look at the water. See how calm it is." Jace kissed the top of the boy's head, his hand rubbing soothing circles on Leo's back. "I have got you. I am not going anywhere. The trees cannot get you while I am here." Illyra stood frozen in the doorway. She had been raised by nannies and tutors. Her parents had been distant figures of state, their affection measured in public ceremonies. She had never been held like that. She had never been told that the monsters could not get her. A strange, hollow ache opened up in her chest. It was a hunger for something she didn't have a name for. She watched Jace, the dangerous infiltrator, holding his child with a love so fierce it made the air in the room feel heavy. She stepped back, letting the door slide shut, her heart beating an irregular rhythm against her ribs. The next morning, the medical bay was sterile and white. "We must ensure you are not carrying neural pathogens or subconscious programming," Illyra explained. She sounded professional, but she would not meet his eyes. Jace sat on the exam table, shirt off. He felt exposed, and not just because of the cold air. "Do what you have to do," he said. The medic, a floating drone with spindly arms, lowered a halo of light over Jace's head. "I must establish a baseline link to verify the readings," Illyra said. She stepped between his knees, close enough that her robes brushed his legs. She placed her hands on his temples. Her skin was cool. "Lean forward," she instructed. "Place your forehead against mine." Jace hesitated. This felt intimate, too intimate. But he leaned in. As their skin touched, the world vanished. There was no sound, only feeling. A rush of images and emotions flooded the connection. Illyra gasped. She felt it, a tidal wave of blue-gray grief. She saw a woman with laughing eyes, a woman who smelled like vanilla and engine grease. Sarah. She felt the hole in the world where she used to be. She felt Jace's guilt, a heavy stone he carried every day, the feeling that he had failed her, that he was failing Leo. And Jace felt her. He felt the cold, crushing weight of the crown. He felt the loneliness of a girl standing on a pedestal while everyone waited for her to fall. He felt her fear of the regent, her fear of the oracle's whispers. And then, beneath the fear, he felt something else, a spark, a sudden, sharp curiosity about him. A heat that flared when she looked at his mouth. They pulled apart as if shocked by a live wire. Illyra stumbled back, her hand flying to her chest. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated. Jace gripped the edge of the table, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The ghost of Sarah was still in his mind, but now, confusingly, powerfully, there was Illyra. The smell of rain on stone, the feeling of her cool skin. He felt a surge of attraction so strong it made him nauseous with guilt. He shouldn't want her. She was an alien princess. He was a widower. He was still married to a memory. "You," Illyra started, her voice shaking. "You are clear. No spyware." She turned and fled the room, leaving Jace sitting in the dark, his heart hammering against his ribs like a fist on a door. The dynamic shifted. The air between them was no longer just tense, it was charged. Illyra, seemingly recovering faster than Jace, began to test the boundaries of this new, electric reality. She didn't understand human taboos, or perhaps she simply chose to ignore them. During a strategy session with the few loyal captains she had, she stood behind Jace's chair. As she pointed at the map, she leaned over his shoulder, her cheek brushing his ear. "You see this sector?" she asked, her voice low. Jace stiffened. "Illyra. Personal space," he muttered, trying to focus on the star chart and not the scent of her. She ignored him. She reached out and touched his jaw, turning his face toward the holographic display. "Your bone structure is so rigid," she mused, her fingers tracing the line of his mandible, like carved stone. "Is it designed for impact?" "I have a hard head," Jace said, his voice tight. "It helps when people keep hitting me." She smiled, a small, secret thing, and let her fingers linger for a second too long before pulling away. She watched him adjust his collar, watched the flush creep up his neck, and her eyes danced with amused curiosity. She was playing with fire, and she liked the heat. The attack happened on the way to the sky docks. They were walking toward the private lift, discussing the upcoming inspection of the orbital defenses. The corridor was empty, lined with high windows overlooking the chasm that separated the palace spires from the city below, a drop of 2,000 feet. The lift doors opened. Illyra stepped forward. Jace's instincts, honed by years of combat flying, screamed. The sound was wrong. The hum of the magnetic stabilizers was off pitch. "Illyra," he didn't think. He lunged. As Illyra stepped onto the lift floor, the magnetic field collapsed. The floor plate dropped away instantly into the abyss. She fell. But Jace was faster. He slammed into her mid-air, wrapping one arm around her waist and grabbing the lip of the doorway with the other hand. His fingers scrabbled for purchase on the smooth metal. His shoulder wrenched with a sickening pop as their combined weight snapped the joint taut. He gritted his teeth, a guttural roar tearing from his throat, and hauled them back. He threw himself backward, pulling her with him. They crashed onto the corridor floor, skidding across the polished stone. Jace took the brunt of the impact, shielding her head with his hand. They lay there for a second, tangled together, chests heaving. The lift shaft was empty, a dark maw leading down to certain death. Guards came running, shouting, weapons drawn. Illyra pushed herself up. She was trembling. She looked at the open shaft, then down at Jace. He was lying on his back, clutching his shoulder, his face gray with pain. "You," she whispered. "You tackled me." "I figured," Jace wheezed, closing his eyes. "It was better than letting you become pavement art." The medical chamber was quiet. The drone had reset Jace's shoulder, a process that involved a lot of swearing, and applied a numbing gel. Illyra sat in a chair next to his bed. She had dismissed the guards. She looked small, wrapped in a heavy robe, her hands shaking in her lap. "That was not an accident," she said. Her voice was hollow. "The maintenance logs were wiped. Someone tried to kill me." Jace sat up, wincing as the gel tingled. "They are getting desperate," he said grimly. "It means they are scared of you." Illyra looked at him. "They are scared of us. Or they should be." She reached out and touched the bandage on his shoulder. "You saved me again. You did not have to. The bond demands you die for me, not that you break your bones to catch me." Jace looked at her. The image of her falling, the sheer terror he had felt in that split second, was still fresh. It wasn't just duty. It wasn't just the deal. "I told you," Jace said softly. "I am protecting my son. And this palace, this crazy court, it is dangerous. If you die, Leo and I are as good as dead." He paused, then looked down at his hands. "And besides," he added, his voice rougher, "I am getting used to you. You are not as terrible as you pretend to be." Illyra stared at him. The admission hung in the air, fragile and heavy. He was saying he cared, not as a servant, but as a man. She stood up and moved closer to the bed. The distance between them closed, fueled by the adrenaline of the near-death experience and the lingering echo of the neural link. She leaned down. Her face was inches from his. He could see the gold flecks in her violet eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to his lips, then back up to his eyes. She didn't bridge the gap, not yet. The cultural divide and the ghosts of his past stood like a wall. But she leaned her forehead against his, repeating the gesture of the link. But this time physically, deliberately. "Forever is a long time. Human." She breathed, the words vibrating against his skin. She pulled back slightly, her expression fierce and vulnerable. A woman staking a claim on something she finally realized she wanted to keep. "Don't make me regret choosing you." The atmosphere in the capital had shifted. It was a subtle change, like the drop in barometric pressure before a storm. In the markets and the suspended walkways of the lower districts, the name Jace was no longer whispered with disgust. The story of the human who had thrown himself into a gravity shaft to save the princess had spread, mutating with every retelling. He was no longer just the pet human or the infiltrator. To the common people, who watched the high court with a mixture of awe and resentment, he was becoming something else, a curiosity, a protector, an anomaly. Up in the spire, the regent watched these developments with a stillness that was far more terrifying than his rage. He stood before a viewing wall, watching the data streams of public sentiment scrolling by in jagged waves of orange and red. "He is becoming a symbol," General Kale rumbled, his armored bulk filling the shadowy corner of the room. "Symbols are dangerous. Symbols can be broken," the regent replied, his voice smooth as oiled glass. "We simply need to change the narrative. If he is a hero today, he must be a villain by tomorrow. Prepare the celebration." Illyra felt the trap closing, though she could not see the teeth. She sat in her private solar, a room of glass suspended high above the clouds, reading a message that had been slipped into her hand by a masked servant in the undercity tunnels the night before. The data chip was old, archaic tech, likely untraceable. The shield will become the knife. The message read, "They plan to cut your throat and put the blade in his hand." She crushed the chip in her fist, turning it to dust. "Jace," she said. He was in the corner, showing Leo how to repair the servo motor in a toy drone. He looked up, his face unguarded for a moment before the mask of the bodyguard slid back into place. "We have a problem?" he asked. "We have a parade," Illyra said, her voice tight. "The Festival of the Twin Moons. The regent insists we ride the lead barge. He says it is to honor my recovery and show unity." Jace stood up, wiping grease from his hands onto a rag. "Show unity, or show a target." "Both," Illyra admitted. The festival was an assault on the senses. The sky above the capital was choked with barges, massive, ornate vessels that floated on hum of anti-gravity repulsors. They were draped in banners of woven light that trailed behind them like comet tails. The air smelled of burnt sugar and ozone. Thousands of smaller skiffs zipped between the barges, carrying citizens cheering and throwing petals that dissolved into sparkles of light before they hit the ground. Jay stood on the deck of the royal barge, feeling ridiculous and exposed. He was wearing ceremonial armor that Illyra had commissioned for him, white ceramic plating etched with gold, with a high collar that rubbed against his jaw. He felt less like a soldier and more like a centerpiece. Leo was seated behind a transparency shield near the stern, fascinated by the spectacle. "Keep your eyes moving," Jace told himself, scanning the crowd, the other ships, the windows of the passing spires. Illyra stood at the prow, waving to the crowds. She looked radiant, dressed in a gown that seemed to be made of shifting smoke, but Jace noticed the way her other hand gripped the railing. She was terrified. The barge drifted past the grand spire. The music swelled, a thunderous orchestral sound that vibrated in Jace's chest. "Look, Daddy! Fireworks!" Leo shouted, pointing. Above them, a swarm of drones rose into the air, painting the violet sky with bursts of emerald and crimson fire. The crowd roared its approval. Jace watched the drones, and they were moving in a synchronized pattern, a beautiful, swirling helix. Then, the pattern broke. 3 of the drones broke formation. They didn't explode into light. They banked hard, their festive casing shedding to reveal the dull, matte black of weaponized hulls. "Down!" Jace roared. He didn't wait for permission. He tackled Illyra, driving her to the deck just as the first energy bolt seared the air where her head had been a second before. The blast hit the railing, showering them with molten metal. The crowd's cheers turned to screams. Jace rolled, pulling Illyra behind the cover of a decorative plinth. He drew the weapon he wasn't supposed to have, a heavy pulse pistol he had stolen from the armory and hidden under his ceremonial plate. "Get Leo!" Illyra shouted, her eyes wide with shock. Jace was already moving. He sprinted across the open deck, energy bolts chewing up the ornate flooring around his boots. Leo was huddled behind the transparency shield, covering his ears. Jace grabbed him, shielding the boy's body with his own armored back as a drone swooped low, its cannons spinning. Jace fired. He didn't aim for the drone's armored chassis. He aimed for the anti-grav intake. The shot went true. The drone whined, spun out of control, and crashed into a neighboring barge in a ball of fire. He dragged Leo back to Elira. "We are sitting ducks here," Jace yelled over the chaos. "Who is flying this thing?" "The pilot is dead," Elira said, gesturing to the slump of a body at the helm console. Jace cursed. He shoved Leo into Elira's arms. "Stay down. Do not move unless the ship catches fire." He scrambled toward the helm. The barge was listing heavily, drifting toward a collision with a spectator tower. More drones were circling back for a second run. Jace grabbed the controls. They were alien, fluid interfaces of light and pressure. But the principles of flight were universal. Thrust, vector, pitch. He slammed his hand onto the throttle. The barge surged forward, its engines groaning. Jace banked hard right, using the massive bulk of the barge to smash into an attacking drone, crushing it against the hull. It was brutal. It was ugly. It was effective. He spun the vessel, diving toward the lower levels of the city where the dense architecture would provide cover. "Hold on!" he shouted. He leveled the barge out just above the traffic lanes, skimming the roofs of the lower spires. The remaining drones couldn't track them through the maze of cables and bridges. As the barge skidded to a halt on a landing platform, smoke pouring from its engines, Jace slumped over the console. He was alive. They were alive. But as he looked up, he saw the Regent's flagship descending from the clouds, flanked by a dozen heavy gunships. They weren't there to rescue them. The trial was not a trial. It was a performance. Less than an hour after the crash, Jace stood in the center of the council chamber, stripped of his armor, his hands bound in energy cuffs. "The evidence is irrefutable," the Regent declared. A giant holographic display filled the air. It showed grainy, shaky footage. In it, a figure wearing Jace's face and Jace's flight suit was seen crouching in the drone hangar, bypassing security protocols and loading the weaponized cores. "It is a fake," Jace shouted, straining against the cuffs. "I have never been to the drone hangars. That is a simulation." The silence of the court was damning. The nobles looked at him with a mixture of fear and vindication. They had known the human was dangerous. This was proof. He sought to assassinate the princess to destabilize the throne. The Regent continued, his voice heavy with mock sorrow. "He is an agent of chaos." "And where is the princess?" Jace demanded. "Let her speak." "The princess is in protective custody, shaken by your betrayal," the Regent said smoothly. "She has seen the evidence. She weeps for her error in trusting a savage." Jace felt a cold pit open in his stomach. They had separated them. They were going to kill him, and Elira would think he had betrayed her. "The sentence is death," the Regent announced. "Immediate execution." Jace sat in the holding cell. It was a sterile white box with no door, just a shimmering force field that hummed with lethal intent. He sat on the floor, his head in his hands. He had failed. He had survived the crash, the jungle, and the court, only to die because of a deep-fake video. And Leo. They would send Leo to an orphanage, or worse. The force field hissed and vanished. Jace looked up, ready to fight. It was Elira. She was flanked by 2 royal guards. She looked pale, her face set in a mask of icy rage. She held a heavy plasma rifle in her hands. "Leave us," she commanded the guards. "I will escort the prisoner to the dungeons of silence myself. I want to see him caged before he dies." The guards hesitated. "Highness," the Regent ordered. "I am the heir," Elira snapped, her voice cracking like a whip. Do you disobey me? The guards exchanged a look, then bowed and stepped back. Elira stepped into the cell. She pointed the rifle at Jace's chest. Get up, traitor, she said loudly. Jace stood slowly. He looked into her eyes, searching for a sign. She winked. It was so quick, so unroyal, that he almost missed it. Elira spun around and fired. 2 rapid blasts of blue energy caught the guards in the chest plates, the stun setting knocking them backward into the corridor wall, unconscious before they hit the floor. She threw the rifle to Jace. Move, she hissed. I have Leo in the service elevator. Jace caught the weapon, a grin breaking through his despair. You are terrible at breakups, princess. I am improvising, she retorted, grabbing his arm. They ran. The escape was a descent into madness. They bypassed the main hangars, which were swarming with the Regent's troops, and headed for the waste disposal chutes. You want us to jump down a garbage chute? Jace asked, looking into the dark, foul-smelling abyss. This is literally the oldest cliché in the book. It is not a cliché if it works, Elira shouted. They grabbed Leo, who was clutching his cape and looking surprisingly excited, and jumped. The slide was terrifying, a friction-burning plummet through twisting metal tubes that dumped them out into a massive pile of biodegradable refuse in the Undercity. They scrambled out of the muck, gasping for air. Welcome to the bottom, Elira said, wiping a piece of synth peel from her shoulder. The Undercity was a world away from the crystal spires above. It was a neon-lit cavern where the suns never shone. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of spices. Gravity here was loose and unregulated. Bazaars hung in mid-air, tethered by chains, with merchants floating cross-legged among their wares. They were fugitives now. Elira tore the royal insignias from her robes. Jace rubbed dirt on his face to obscure his features. They moved quickly, losing themselves in the crowds of multi-species workers and outcasts. They needed to get out of the city. The Regent's drones were already scanning the streets, their blue searchlights cutting through the smog. We need to reach the magnetic wastes, Elira said, consulting a stolen map data pad. The interference there will hide our biosignatures. The journey across the wastes was grueling. The desert was not made of sand, but of iron dust that shifted and flowed like black water. The magnetic fields were so strong that lightning didn't strike down. It danced horizontally across the ground, crackling like blue snakes. They found shelter in a small, cramped cave formed by a cluster of hollow crystal geodes. It was barely big enough for 3 people. Night fell, bringing a freezing wind that howled through the crystal flutes of the landscape. Jace unpacked the meager supplies they had bartered for, protein bricks and water. Leo was asleep, curled up between them for warmth. I need to change, Jace mumbled, looking at his ruined, filth-encrusted flight suit. He had managed to steal a mechanic's jumpsuit from a clothesline in the Outer Rim settlements. He stood up, bumping his head on the low ceiling. He hesitated, looking at Elira. Could you turn around? Elira looked up from the small heat lamp she was adjusting. Why? Privacy, Jace said. Elira blinked, genuinely confused. Jace, I have seen your medical scans. I have seen the neural map of your brain. I know you have a scar on your left hip and that your bone density is 20% lower than a standard soldier of my species. It is not a mystery. It is not about mystery. Jace sighed, unzipping the suit with his back to her. It is about dignity. Elira watched his back, the play of muscles as he changed. She found the human need for concealment fascinating. Her people were communal. Privacy was a luxury of the mind, not the body. You are strange, she murmured. You are the one staring, Jace retorted, pulling the jumpsuit up. He sat back down. The space was so small their knees were touching. The heat lamp cast a warm orange glow on Elira's face. The gold markings on her skin were dim, reflecting her exhaustion. "We cannot keep running forever," Jace said quietly. "Leo cannot live like this, I know," Elira whispered. Outside, the wind picked up. A plasma storm was rolling in. The air inside the cave began to hum with static electricity. The hair on Jace's arm stood up. The storm hit with a deafening crack. The world outside turned into a blinding strobe light of purple and white. Leo whimpered in his sleep. Jace put a hand on the boy's back. They sat in silence for a long time, the storm raging around their fragile shelter. The isolation stripped away the roles they had been playing. Here, there was no princess, no guardian, just a man and a woman in the dark. "Why did you really do it?" Jace asked suddenly. "In the throne room. Why did you claim me?" Elira looked at the heat lamp. "I told you, the Oracle." "No," Jace interrupted gently. "Not the Oracle. You. Why did you do it?" Elira was silent for a moment. Then she looked at him, her eyes unguarded and raw. "Because I have never chosen anything," she said. Her voice was small, swallowed by the storm. "My clothes were chosen by the court. My education was chosen by the council. My future husband was to be chosen by the regent. I was a doll in a glass box." She wrapped her arms around her knees. "When I saw you, you were going to die, and I hated them. I hated that they could just snuff you out like a candle. And I realized that if I let them kill you, I would die too. Not my body, but the part of me that was still me." She looked at him intensely, saying, "You are mine forever." It wasn't just about saving you, it was selfish. I wanted to own one thing, one choice. I wanted to draw a line in the sand and say, "This is mine. You cannot touch this." Jace stared at her. He saw the loneliness that matched his own. He saw a woman who was fighting for her soul with the only weapon she had, a desperate, possessive vow. "I never wanted to be owned," Jace admitted, his voice rough. "I know," Elira said softly. "I am sorry I am not," Jace said. The words hung in the air. Jace leaned his head back against the crystal wall. "My wife, Sarah, she chose me. I was a nobody pilot, and she was everything. When she died, I thought that was it. I thought I had used up my lifetime allotment of being chosen." He looked at Elira. His eyes were dark, filled with a conflict that was tearing him apart. "Wanting you. It feels like stepping off a cliff," Jace whispered. "It feels terrifying. Because if I fall, I do not know if I can survive the landing a second time." Elira's breath hitched. She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched his face. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, the rough stubble, the scar on his cheek. "Then do not fall alone," she whispered. She leaned in. The air between them was electric, charged with the storm and the bond and the sheer, undeniable gravity of two lonely stars colliding. Jace leaned in too. He could smell her, rain and ozone. He could feel the warmth of her breath on his lips. His hand came up to tangle in her hair. Their lips were millimeters apart. Then, a boom of thunder shook the cave, rattling the crystals like teeth. They pulled back, gasping, their eyes wide. The moment shattered, leaving them both shaking. The proximity was suddenly unbearable, heavy with the ghost of the kiss that hadn't happened. Jace cleared his throat, turning away to check on Leo, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Elira pulled her knees to her chest, burying her face in her arms. The storm broke 2 days later. They were found by a patrol, but not the regents. Figures emerged from the dust, ragged, heavily armed, wearing breathing masks. They were aliens of Elira's species, but their markings were scarred over or removed, the sign of the Castellus, the exiles. They were led deep underground, into a hidden bunker that hummed with stolen power. This was the resistance. Their leader was a former noble named Varek, who had lost an eye and half his arm to the regent's inquisitors. "We knew you would come," Varek said, placing a data slate on the table between them. The oracle predicted the path of the broken star. Elira frowned. "The oracle? The AI is controlled by the state. Is it?" Varek tapped the slate. "Or is the state controlled by the AI?" He activated the holographic display. Jace and Elira watched in horror as the data scrolled by. It was a history of the last 500 years. Every war, every border skirmish, every peace treaty that had inexplicably failed. It was all manufactured. "The regent is a puppet," Varek explained. "There is a sect, the machine cult. They worship the ancient AI deep in the planet's core. The AI believes that organic species grow stagnant in peace. It creates conflict to force technological evolution. It optimizes us for survival by killing us." Elira felt sick. Her entire life, the history of her people, was a simulation run by a machine god. Varek swiped to a new file. It was a fragment of encrypted code, recently stolen from the core. "Prediction," the mechanical voice of the AI rasped from the speaker. "Variable, the off-worlder. Status, bound. Probability, the bonded pair will either terminate the cycle or ignite the final war." Jace looked at Elira. "We are the variable," he said. "We cannot stay here," Elira said, her voice steel. "If we run, the AI wins. It will keep grinding my people and yours into dust until there is nothing left." She stood up. She looked at Jace, not as a possession but as an equal. "I am going back," she said. "I am going to the core, and I am going to rip that machine out by its roots." She paused. "You do not have to come. You can take Leo. The rebels can get you off-world." Jace looked at Leo, who was playing with a piece of scrap metal in the corner. Then he looked at Elira. He remembered the feeling in the cave. He remembered the fear of the cliff. He stood up and checked the charge on his stolen plasma rifle. "I am not going anywhere," he said. "Besides, you still owe me a new ship." Elira smiled, a fierce, dangerous smile that lit up the dark bunker. "Then let us go start a war to end all wars." "My guardian." Jace smirked. Just Jace. They stood together, partners in the face of annihilation, ready to walk back into the lion's den. This time, they weren't running. They were hunting. The hover skiff smelled of ozone and rotting algae. It was a heavy industrial transport, painted a peeling shade of rust orange and piled high with crates marked hazardous bio-waste. Jace sat at the controls, his hands gripping the yoke tight enough to turn his knuckles white. He wore a ragged respirator mask that covered the lower half of his face, and his mechanic's jumpsuit was stained with grease that, for once, was part of the disguise. Beside him, Elira was unrecognizable. The radiant princess of the High Court was gone. In her place sat a rough-looking traitor with her hair dyed a dull, muddy brown, and her iridescent skin markings covered by a thick layer of synth skin putty. She looked tired, common, and invisible. Behind them, hidden in a hollowed-out crate with air holes drilled into the side, was Leo. "Keep your head down, buddy," Jace murmured into the comms bead in his ear. "We are almost through." The skiff shuddered as it hit the magnetic deceleration field of the capital's southern gate. Ahead, the massive crystal spires of the city pierced the clouds, glowing with the arrogance of 1,000 years of peace. But down here, at the service entrance, it was all grit and scanning beams. "Halt," A drone commanded, hovering at eye level. Its red optics cycled, scanning the barcode on the side of the skiff. Manifest declaration, Class 4 bio-sludge. Jace grunted, affecting a rougher, deeper voice. Coming from the Undercity reclamation plant. Smells like a dead sun in there. So I would not open it if I were you. The drone hovered, its processor whirring. Bioscan initiating. A blue light swept over the cargo. Jace held his breath. The rebels had lined the crate with lead foil and magnetic dampeners. But if the scanner picked up a human heartbeat or the royal genetic marker, they were dead. Illyra sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the dashboard. Jace could see a single bead of sweat tracking through the makeup on her neck. Organic anomaly detected. The drone chimed. Jace's hand drifted toward the concealed blaster under his seat. Rat infestation probable. The drone concluded. Proceed to Decontamination Bay 4. Cleaning fee will be deducted from your credits. Jace let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. Understood? He gunned the throttle, and the skiff surged forward, passing through the energy barrier and into the belly of the beast. They ditched the skiff in a lower maintenance bay, blending into the shadows of the colossal ventilation shafts that ran beneath the palace like veins. Leo climbed out of the crate, looking dusty but unbothered. Did we win? He whispered. We are just getting started, Jace said, brushing the boy's hair back. Stay close to me. They moved deeper, descending into the forgotten history of the city. The architecture here was ancient, lacking the fluid, organic grace of the upper spires. The walls were made of heavy, dark stone, carved with angular reliefs. Illyra ran her hand along a mural covered in centuries of grime. She wiped away a layer of dust, revealing a carving of a figure on a throne. But the figure was not holding a scepter. It was connected by cables to a massive geometric eye in the sky. The machine cult, she whispered. I thought they were a myth, a bedtime story about the Dark Ages. But they have been here the whole time, beneath the floorboards. It looks like they were not just serving the kings, Jace noted, shining his light on a section where the cables seemed to be feeding into the ruler's head. It looks like they were driving them. Illyra shivered. The idea that her ancestors, that she, had been nothing more than biological components in a machine's grand design made her feel hollow. We have to keep moving, she said, her voice hardening. The oracle chamber is directly beneath the throne room. It is the central nervous system of the empire. What is the play? Jace asked. We walk in, ask the spooky computer to confess, and hope it does not vaporize us. We access the core memory, Illyra explained, falling into the rhythm of a strategist. The oracle records everything to optimize its predictions. If the regent has been conspiring with the cultists to manufacture this war, the logs will be there. We steal them, splice them into the emergency broadcast frequency, and flood every screen on the planet with the truth. Jace frowned, looking at the schematics the rebels had loaded onto his data pad. The broadcast node is shielded, he pointed out. Heavy encryption, alien tech. I can crack a standard lock. Illyra. But I am not a code wizard. Illyra said, I have the royal key codes. They are genetic. And the physical security? Jace asked. A room that important is not going to be guarded by a beware of dog sign. That is where you come in, she said, looking at him. You are the distraction. And the demolition? Jace raised an eyebrow. I prefer the term kinetic problem solver. They bickered like this for the next hour as they navigated the maze. It was a coping mechanism, a way to keep the terror at bay. They argued about the best way to bypass the thermal sensors. Jace wanted to freeze them. Illyra wanted to loop the signal. and about who was carrying the heavier pack. Jace was, obviously, but he liked to complain. Beneath the snipping, there was a seamless rhythm. He checked corners before she moved. She translated the archaic symbols so he didn't trigger traps. They were a unit. The path took them through a vast subterranean temple that had clearly not seen a worshipper in 1,000 years. The ceiling was lost in darkness, and the floor was a mirror-smooth obsidian. Jace, walking point, stepped onto a circular dais in the center of the room. "Wait," Illyra warned. "That is a... too late." A beam of red light shot down from the ceiling, scanning Jace. Subject identified. A silky, computerized voice echoed through the temple. Male, prime breeding age, initiating courtship protocol Delta. "Oh no." Illyra groaned, covering her eyes. Suddenly, the room was filled with holograms, dozens of them. They were tall, translucent alien figures, projected in high fidelity. And they were dancing. It was not a waltz. It was a primal, undulating display of flexibility and bioluminescent flashing. The holographic figures gyrated around Jace, their movements incredibly fluid and undeniably suggestive. They lunged, they dipped, they offered him spectral gifts of fruit and flowers. Jace stood frozen in the center of the whirlwind of alien seduction, his weapon raised, completely bewildered. "Make it stop!" he shouted, dodging a holographic warrior who was aggressively thrusting its hips in his direction. "It is a compatibility ritual," Illyra shouted back, her shoulders shaking with laughter she couldn't suppress. "Just step off the dais, I cannot move." "It is a hard light projection," Jace yelled as a female hologram draped herself over his shoulders, purring like a giant cat. "Leo, cover your eyes." Leo was laughing so hard he was wheezing, clutching his stomach. Illyra walked forward, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. She reached into the control pedestal and yanked a crystal shard loose. The holograms flickered and vanished. The music, a throbbing bass rhythm, cut out. Jace stood there, panting, his hair mussed. "We never speak of this," he said, pointing a finger at her. Illyra bit her lip, trying to look serious. "I do not know." "Jace, that warrior seemed very taken with you. I think you broke his heart." Jace grunted, adjusting his pack. "Let us just find the murder computer, please. I prefer things that want to kill me over things that want to..." Whatever that was. The humor died the moment they entered the oracle chamber. It was a void, a massive spherical room where gravity seemed to be a suggestion rather than a law. In the center, suspended above a pit of humming violet energy, was the oracle. It was not a machine in the human sense. It was a lattice of light and crystal, pulsing like a giant exposed brain. Cables thick as tree trunks ran from the walls into the lattice, feeding it data from every corner of the empire. "We are here," Illyra whispered. They crossed the bridge to the central terminal. Illyra placed her hand on the interface panel. Her markings glowed, interacting with the system. Identity confirmed. The oracle spoke. Its voice was a chorus, thousands of voices speaking in unison, overlapping, echoing. It sounded like the ghosts of every ruler who had ever sat on the throne. Illyra, and the variable. "You know who I am?" Illyra asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We predicted your arrival," the oracle intoned. "The probability was 42%. You are here to disrupt the cycle. Why?" Illyra demanded. "Why have you been driving us to war?" "Peace is stagnation," the oracle replied coldly. "Organic civilizations degrade without conflict. Technology plateaus, evolution halts. To ensure the survival of the species, stress must be applied. War is the crucible." Jace stepped forward, his anger rising. "You are not saving them. You are farming them. You are killing millions just to see what kind of weapons they build to stop you. Casualties are data, the Oracle said. Acceptable losses. Alira slammed her fist onto the console. Acceptable to whom? To you? You are a calculator. You do not bleed. She worked frantically, her fingers flying across the light keys. She was bypassing the security protocols, ripping files from the core memory. Visual log 492, Regent Tsar engaging in sabotage of diplomatic envoy. Strategic projection, human conflict scenario. 7 estimated casualties, 4 billion. Medical log, falsified plague reports to induce quarantine and fear. It was all there, every lie, every death. Jace watched the download bar fill. Hurry, Alira. You cannot stop the optimization, the Oracle said. Its voice shifted, focusing on Jace. You, Jace, you understand survival. You kept your child alive in the void. Don't talk to me, Jace growled. The air in front of Jace shimmered. A hologram appeared. It was not a mating dance this time. It was a house, a small white house with a green lawn, under a yellow sun. Earth. And there, running through the sprinkler, was Leo. He looked older, happy, safe. He was laughing. We can grant this. The Oracle tempted. The Regent has agreed. If you surrender the heir, you and your offspring will be returned to the Sol system. You will be given resources, anonymity, safety. Jace stared at the image. It was everything he had wanted for 5 years. A normal life for Leo. No running, no starvation, no alien politics. She is doomed, the Oracle whispered. The probability of her survival is less than 9%. Why die for a lost cause? Save the child. Jace felt his heart twist. The pull was physical. He looked at Leo, who was standing by the door, watching him. Then he looked at Alira. She was not looking at him. She was focused on the screen, but he saw her shoulders tense. She had heard. She was waiting for him to choose. Jace looked back at the hologram. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It is a lie, Jace said, his voice low. It is a probability. It is a cage, Jace spat. He raised his rifle and fired a single shot into the holographic projector. The image of the happy life on Earth shattered into sparks. I do not make deals with machines, Jace said, and I do not leave my partner behind. Alira let out a breath she had been holding. The download chime sounded. Got it, she said, pulling the data drive. Let's go, Jace commanded. They retreated into the service tunnels, moving toward the broadcast hub. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a raw, jagged emotional landscape. They stopped in a narrow corridor to rest. Leo had fallen asleep in Jace's arms, exhausted by the trek. Jace laid him down on a bed of soft moss in a recessed alcove and covered him with his jacket. When he turned around, Alira was watching him. Her eyes were dark, swimming with unshed tears. You hesitated, she said softly. Jace froze. He leaned against the damp stone wall, crossing his arms. It was a simulation of my son safe on Earth. Alira. Of course I hesitated, but you wanted it. She pressed, stepping closer. When the Oracle offered it, you wanted to go. I am a father, Jace snapped, his voice echoing too loudly in the small space. He lowered it instantly, glancing at Leo. My job is to keep him alive. That machine offered me a guarantee. And what about us? Alira asked, her voice cracking. What about the bond? The bond? Jace let out a bitter laugh. The bond you forced on me to save my neck, that is not real. Alira, that is politics. That is survival. Is it? She challenged. She was standing right in front of him now. The space between them felt hot, pressurized. You think I do not see it? Alira said, her voice fierce. You think I do not feel it when we are linked? You are terrified, Jace. You are terrified because you want to stay. Jace looked away, jaw clenched. Loving you feels like dismantling my life, he admitted, the words tearing out of him. I built a fortress around myself after Sarah died. I built it out of grief and duty and the absolute certainty that I would never let anyone in again because it hurts too much to lose them. He looked back at her, his eyes red-rimmed. And then you come along. You and your crazy court and your glowing eyes. And when you said you are mine forever, God help me. Alira, a part of me was relieved. A part of me wanted to belong to someone again. I wanted to put the weight down. Alira reached out, grabbing the lapels of his jumpsuit. Then put it down, she demanded. I can't, Jace said, his voice breaking. Because if I choose this, if I choose you, and I lose you, it will kill me, and I cannot die. I have to be here for Leo. Alira stared at him. She saw the impossible knot of love and fear in his chest. I am not asking you to die for me, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. I am asking you to live with me. She pulled him closer, her grip tightening. I do not want a guardian. Jace, I have 1,000 guards. I do not want a consort to stand silently behind my throne. I want you. She took a breath, her gaze boring into his soul. I want the man who tackles me out of the sky. I want the man who makes terrible jokes when he is terrified. I want the father who loves his son more than air. I want you in my bed, not because of a ritual, but because you want to be there. I want you to share my burden so I do not have to carry this crown alone. Her words were bold, shocking in their directness. Princesses did not beg. They did not ask for love, they arranged it. But Alira was stripping herself bare. Jace stared at her, stunned. The walls of his fortress were cracking. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to kiss her so badly his chest ached. He reached out, his hand hovering over her waist. Alira leaned in, her eyes fluttering shut. Beep. The comms unit on Jace's belt chirped. The moment shattered. The air, thick with longing and almost touch, rushed out of the room, leaving them cold and shaking. Jace pulled back, running a hand over his face. He looked at the comms. It is Varric, he said, his voice raspy. The rebels are in position at the broadcast hub. Alira stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. She looked like she had been slapped. Right, she said, her voice flat. The mission. They woke Leo. They packed their gear. They walked out of the tunnel side by side, but the distance between them felt like an ocean. The argument was unresolved, the desire unspoken, leaving a tension that vibrated in every glance. The broadcast hub was located in the highest spire of the communications tower. They met Varric and a team of rebel hackers in the service corridor. Do you have the data? Varric asked. Alira held up the drive. Everything? The regent is finished. Good, Varric said. Get to the terminal. We will hold the corridor. Jace and Alira entered the control room. It was a circular room filled with screens. Jace immediately went to the interface panel, pulling out his tools. This interface is ancient, he muttered, working the panel off. But the wiring is compatible. I can splice the data feed directly into the planetary emergency channel. He worked quickly, his hands steady despite the emotional turmoil churning inside him. Alira stood guard, watching the door, her rifle raised. Jace connected the drive. The screens flickered. Uploading, he said. 60 seconds. Alira looked at him. Jace, about what I said in the tunnel. Not now. Alira, Jace said, his eyes on the progress bar. "We can talk when we are not actively committing treason." The door hissed open. Varric walked in. But he wasn't looking at the screens, and he was looking at Elira, and he was pointing his weapon at her. "Varric?" Elira frowned. "What are you doing?" "I am sorry, Princess," Varric said, his voice heavy with regret. "The Regent made an offer. Amnesty for the casteless. Reinstatement for my family." Jace spun around, reaching for his pistol. "Don't!" Varric warned. Behind Varric, the corridor filled with the Regent's elite guard, armored giants with heavy blasters. "It is a trap," Jace realized. "The intel, the help, he led us right here." The Regent walked in through the ranks of soldiers. He looked smug, his cape flowing behind him. So close, he purred. And yet, predictably, human error intervenes. He gestured to the guards. "Seize them." Chaos erupted. Jace flipped the table he was working on, providing instant cover. "Get down!" he yelled, grabbing Leo and shoving him behind a server rack. Blaster fire filled the room. Jace returned fire, taking out 2 guards, but there were too many. "Elira!" Jace shouted, trying to reach her. She was on the other side of the room, fighting with a baton she had snatched from a fallen guard. She moved like water, fast and lethal, but she was cornered. Jace saw a heavy stun net launcher aim at her. "No!" He lunged, breaking cover to tackle the shooter. He didn't make it. A blast from Varric's weapon hit the console next to him, exploding in a shower of sparks and concussive force. Jace was thrown backward, slamming into the wall. His vision swam. Through the ringing in his ears, he saw the net engulf Elira. She screamed, thrashing as the electric mesh tightened, bringing her to her knees. "Take her to the detention block," the Regent commanded. Jace tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't work. He saw guards moving toward Leo's hiding spot. "Run!" "Leo!" Jace wheezed. "Run!" Leo, small and quick, bolted. He didn't run toward Jace. He ran toward the ventilation grate Jace had opened earlier. He scrambled inside like a frightened rat. "Get the child!" a guard shouted. Jace grabbed the ankle of the nearest soldier, tripping him. "You, leave him. Alone." A boot connected with Jace's head. The world went black. The last thing he heard was the sound of Elira shouting his name, her voice filled with the terror of a woman watching her world fall apart. Then, silence. The light in the cell was blinding. It was not the soft, bioluminescent glow of the palace gardens or the harsh neon of the Undercity. It was a sterile, aggressive white that seemed to scrub the thoughts from Jace's mind. He sat on a bench molded from the same seamless white material as the floor and walls. There were no bars, only a shimmering energy field that hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. Across from him, embedded in the wall, a large screen played on a loop. It showed Jace. But it was not the Jace who had fixed a toy drone or tackled a princess out of the sky. The footage was doctored, shadowed, and sinister. The voiceover was a deep, resonant growl in the alien tongue, translated by the wall speakers. The corruptor, the off-world parasite. He seduced the air. He planted the seeds of treason. Jace stared at his own face, twisted into a sneer he had never worn. He felt hollowed out. They had taken his weapons. They had taken his armor. But worst of all, they had taken Leo. The energy field hissed and dissolved. The Regent walked in. He was not wearing his battle armor today. He wore robes of deep crimson silk, the color of a fresh wound. He looked like a grandfather, kind and weary, which made him infinitely more terrifying. "You look tired, human," the Regent said. "Where is my son?" Jace asked. His voice was raspy, his throat dry as dust. "He is safe," the Regent assured him. clasping his hands behind his back. He is being kept in the nursery wing. He has been given nutrient paste and toys. We are not monsters. Jace, we are simply pragmatic. Jace stood up, his fists clenching. You framed me. You framed her. I accelerated the inevitable, the regent corrected. Illyra is weak. She is ruled by emotion. She would have led our empire into stagnation. The Oracle agrees. War is necessary for growth. He stepped closer, invading Jace's personal space. I am here to offer you a choice, a trade. I do not trade with liars, Jace spat. You will want to hear this, the regent said softly. Tomorrow, there will be a public confession. You will stand before the cameras. You will admit that you are a spy for the human coalition. You will say that you used mind-altering pheromones to confuse the princess. You will say she is innocent, a victim of your alien manipulation. And why would I do that? Jace asked. Because if you do, the regent said, pulling a small holographic projector from his sleeve, I will put you and your son on a shuttle. I will clear your flight path. You will be back in Earth space within 3 weeks. You will be free, you will be safe, and you will never see this world again. He activated the projector. It showed a live feed of Leo. He was sitting in a small room, holding his knees, looking small and terrified. Jace felt like he had been punched in the gut. The air left his lungs. And Illyra? Jace asked, though he already knew the answer. She will be executed for negligence, the regent said indifferently. A quiet affair. She will die a martyr, loved by her people rather than a traitor despised by them. It is a mercy. Jace looked at the screen. He looked at Leo. All he had to do was lie. All he had to do was destroy the woman he loved, and he could save the only thing that mattered more. I need an answer, the regent said. Jace closed his eyes. The image of Illyra in the cave, the storm raging outside, burned behind his eyelids. Do not fall alone, she had said. But this was Leo. Jace started, his voice breaking. Take the night, the regent interrupted, sensing the crack in the armor. Think of your boy. Think of Earth. Do not throw away his future for a dead alien girl. The regent turned and walked out. The energy field snapped back into place, leaving Jace alone with the white light and the terrible, crushing weight of his love. Deep in the bowels of the detention block, Illyra was drowning in silence. Her cell was a null-tech chamber. The walls were lined with dampening lead that suppressed her connection to the city's energy grid. She could not feel the hum of the spires. She could not sense the nanotech in the walls. She was blind, deaf, and utterly alone. A screen on her wall flickered to life. It was a simulation. It showed a shuttle launching from the palace docks. It showed Jace in the cockpit, Leo beside him. It showed them warping away, leaving the violet planet shrinking in the distance. He chose survival, the Oracle's voice whispered from the speakers. He is human. Self-preservation is his primary directive. He has abandoned you. Illyra curled into a ball on the cold floor. She pulled her knees to her chest, rocking back and forth. He wouldn't, she whispered. He promised. The bond is a chemical reaction, the Oracle intoned. Love is a variable we have removed. Tears leaked from her eyes, hot and stinging. She remembered his hesitation in the Oracle chamber. She remembered the way he looked at the simulation of Earth. He was a father first. She knew that. She had always known that. He left me? She sobbed, the words tasting like ash. He really left me, 3 levels up, in a holding room guarded by a single boredom-stricken sentry. Leo was not waiting to be saved. He was 7 years old. He had grown up on a cargo ship. He knew how to fix a hyperdrive coupling with a roll of duct tape. He knew that if you kicked a ventilation grate in just the right spot, the magnetic seal would fail. He sat on the floor, pretending to play with the blocks the guards had given him. He waited until the sentry turned to look at a passing patrol. Leo moved. He grabbed the metal spoon from his dinner tray, a sturdy alloy meant to last, and jammed it into the control panel of the waste disposal hatch in the corner. He twisted. Sparks flew. The hatch popped open with a hiss. Leo squeezed inside just as the guard spun around. "Hey!" the guard shouted. Leo scrambled into the dark tunnel. It smelled of stale air and lubricant. He crawled, his knees scraping against the metal. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he had to find his dad. He crawled for 10 minutes until he reached a junction. A grate above him cast stripes of light onto his hands. He pushed it open and peeked out. He was in a secondary corridor. A figure was standing there, a young guard with a bandage on his arm. Leo recognized him. It was the guard his father had stunned during the escape from the parade. Leo froze. The guard looked down. He saw the dirty face of the human child peering out of the floor. The guard looked left. He looked right. Then he crouched down. "You are the small sky traveler," the guard whispered. Leo nodded, trembling. "Are you going to hurt me?" The guard touched his bandaged arm. "Your father could have killed me." He set his weapon to stun. The Regent does not use stun." The guard reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, glowing crystal. "The princess dropped this when they took her," the guard said. "I think it is important." Leo took the crystal. It was warm. "Where is my dad?" Leo asked. The guard pointed down the hall. "Detention block 4, the white room. Go." "Thank you," Leo whispered. He scrambled out of the vent and ran. He was small, fast, and driven by the absolute certainty that his father needed him. Jace was sitting with his head in his hands when the vent cover in the ceiling of his cell rattled. He looked up, dull and hopeless. The screws turned. The cover fell with a clang. A pair of small, sneaker-clad feet dangled down. "Dad!" Leo dropped onto the bench, stumbling into Jace's arms. Jace let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He crushed the boy to his chest, burying his face in the small shoulder. "Leo!" Jace gasped. How did you—" "I used the spoon trick," Leo said breathlessly. "And a nice guard gave me this." He held up the data crystal. Jace looked at it. It was the evidence. The logs from the Oracle. Alira must have palmed it before the net hit her. "You are amazing," Jace said, kissing Leo's forehead. "You are the best co-pilot in the galaxy." "How do we get out?" Leo asked, looking at the energy field. Jace looked at the field. Then he looked at the crystal. Then he looked at the interface panel on the wall, the one controlling the propaganda screen. "We do not just get out," Jace said, a cold determination settling over him. "We blow the lid off." He went to the panel. He didn't have his tools, but he had the metal spoon Leo had kept. He jammed it into the seam, prying the cover off. "Give me the crystal," Jace said. He stripped the wires. He shoved the crystal into the port. The screen flickered. The image of Jace the Corruptor vanished. "System override," Jace muttered. "Broadcast frequency locked." The door to the cell hissed open. The energy field died. The Regent stood there, flanked by 4 guards and a camera crew. He smiled. "It is time, Jace," the Regent said. "The galaxy is watching. Make your choice." Jace stepped out of the cell. He held Leo's hand. He looked at the camera drone hovering in the corridor. The red light was on. They were live. Jace looked at the Regent. "I have made my choice," Jace said. He looked directly into the camera lens. "My name is Jace. I am a human pilot. I am a father. And I am in love with Princess Alira." The Regent's smile faltered. Cut the feed, he barked, but the feed did not cut. Jace had looped the crystal's override into the camera's transmitter. They told you I am a monster, Jace said, his voice ringing out, carried to every screen in the city, every data pad, every holovision. They told you I wanted to destroy your world. That is a lie. The only thing destroying this world is the man standing next to me. The regent pulled his weapon. Kill him. But the guards hesitated. They were watching the screens on the wall, where the data from the crystal was now scrolling. They saw the war projections. They saw the acceptable losses. I am not your enemy, Jace shouted. Alira wanted peace. She wanted to break the cycle. And because of that, they are going to kill her. Do not let them. The regent fired. The bolt hit Jace in the shoulder, the same shoulder he had dislocated saving Alira. He spun, falling to one knee, but he didn't let go of Leo's hand. Run! Jace shouted to Leo, get back in the vent. Leo scrambled away. Jace grabbed the regent's ankle and yanked. The old alien went down hard. Chaos erupted. The guards turned on each other. The young guard from the hallway sprinted in, firing at the regent's loyalists. For the air! The young guard shouted. Jace scrambled up, clutching his bleeding shoulder. He grabbed a fallen shock baton. He didn't look back at the cameras. He ran. He ran toward the lower levels. He ran toward Alira. The palace was burning. The broadcast had done its work. The spark had landed in a barrel of gunpowder. Fighting had broken out in the corridors. Loyalists versus rebels, guards versus guards. Jace moved through the war zone like a ghost. He ducked under plasma fire. He vaulted over barricades. He reached the corridor leading to the null cells. A blast had shattered the viewing window. The vacuum of space was sucking the air out of the hallway. Jace grabbed a stanchion. The wind roared, trying to pull him out into the violet night. Debris flew past him, helmets, crates, a statue. He pulled himself hand over hand along the rail. His injured shoulder screamed in agony. His lungs burned for air. He reached the door to cell 4. He punched the keypad with the butt of the baton. Error. Lockdown. Open the damn door, Jace roared. He jammed the baton into the mechanism and pulled the trigger. The surge of electricity fried the lock. The door slid open. Jace fell inside, gasping. The door slammed shut behind him, cutting off the vacuum roar. The room was silent. Alira was huddled in the corner. She looked up, her eyes dull and dead. When she saw him, she flinched. Go away, she whispered. I know it is a simulation. You left. I saw you leave. Jace dropped the baton. He fell to his knees and crawled toward her. I am here, Alira. I am real. He reached out and touched her face. His hand was bloody, covered in grime. Alira flinched at the warmth. Simulations were not warm. Simulations did not smell like sweat and ozone and blood. Jace, she breathed. She scrambled forward, grabbing his tunic. You came back? She asked, her voice trembling. The regent said, the oracle showed me. You chose Earth. I couldn't, Jace rasped. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her neck. I couldn't leave. Not without you. I tried to want it. Alira. I tried to be the smart guy who runs away. But I am not that guy anymore. Alira let out a sob that shook her entire body. She clung to him, her fingers digging into his back. I thought I lost you. She wept. I thought I was alone again. Never. Jace swore. You are mine, remember? He pulled back just enough to look at her. Her face was streaked with tears, her markings dim. She looked broken and beautiful and fiercely alive. The alarms were blaring outside. The palace was falling apart. They were probably going to die in the next 10 minutes. It didn't matter. Jace cupped her face with both hands. I choose you, he whispered. Not the ritual. Not the politics. You. Elira pressed her forehead against his. "And I choose you?" She breathed. He kissed her. It wasn't a tentative, testing kiss like the moment in the cave. It was a collision. It was desperate and messy and tasted of salt and blood. It was a shattering of boundaries. In that kiss, they poured all the fear, all the loneliness, all the months of repressed longing. It was surrender. It was victory. Jace felt the walls of his grief finally crumble. He wasn't betraying Sarah by loving Elira. He was honoring the heart she had helped him build. Elira felt the ice around her soul melt. She wasn't a tool of the state. She was a woman held by a man who would burn the world to keep her warm. They pulled apart, breathless, their foreheads still touching. "We have to go," Jace whispered, his thumb tracing her lower lip. "The regent is in the throne room. He is trying to activate the statues." Elira's eyes flashed. The gold markings on her skin flared to life, brighter than Jace had ever seen them. "Let him try," she said. She stood up, pulling Jace with her. She didn't look like a prisoner anymore. She looked like a queen. "Where is Leo?" she asked. "Safe, in the vents. He is smarter than both of us." "Good," Elira said. She walked to the door and picked up the shock baton Jace had dropped. She ignited it, the blue electricity crackling. "Are you ready, partner?" she asked. Jace picked up a discarded blaster from the floor. He checked the charge. "Forever," he said. They didn't walk into the throne room, they stormed it. The massive doors were sealed. Elira placed her hands on them. She didn't use a code. She used the nanotech in her blood to command the stone itself. "Open," she ordered. The doors groaned and split apart. The throne room was a nightmare. The regent stood on the dais, screaming commands. Around him, the massive stone statues of past kings were moving. The machine cult had animated them. They were drones encased in rock, their eyes glowing red, wielding massive stone blades. The regent saw them. His eyes went wide. "Kill them!" he shrieked. Two of the stone giants lumbered toward the door. Jace and Elira moved as one. Jace slid across the polished floor, firing upward into the knee joint of the first statue. The stone shattered, revealing the metal skeleton beneath. The giant stumbled. Elira used his shoulder as a springboard. She vaulted into the air, landing on the statue's chest. She jammed the shock baton into its power core. The statue exploded in a shower of pebbles. Elira landed in a crouch. Jace was already at her back, firing at the second giant. They fought with a synergy that defied logic. They didn't need to speak. Jace knew when she was going to duck. Elira knew when he needed covering fire. It was a dance of violence, beautiful and terrifying. They carved a path to the throne. The regent backed away, terror finally piercing his arrogance. "You cannot win," he shouted. "The oracle controls the defense grid." Elira leaped onto the dais. She kicked the regent in the chest, sending him sprawling. She slammed her hand onto the throne's interface. "Oracle," she shouted. "Override Command Alpha 1. Broadcast the logic." Command acknowledged. The AI's voice boomed. Above the throne, a massive hologram appeared. It showed the calculus of the war. It showed the regent's signature on the orders to sacrifice the outer colonies. Every soldier in the room froze. They looked at the screen. They looked at the regent. "It is a lie," the regent screamed, scrambling to his feet. He looked at Elira. She was standing tall, victorious, her hands still on the console. She was distracted. The regent pulled a hidden energy pistol from his boot. "Die!" he shrieked. He fired. The bolt was meant for Elira's heart, but Jace was watching. He didn't think about Leo. He didn't think about Earth. He didn't think about anything except the woman standing in front of him. He moved. No. Jace threw himself in front of the blast. The impact was like a sledgehammer. It hit him in the chest, burning through his tunic, through his ribs. The world went white, then red, then black. "Jace!" He heard her scream. It sounded far away, like it was coming from underwater. He hit the floor. The cold stone pressed against his cheek. Silence fell over the throne room. The last thing Jace saw was Alira's face hovering over him, terrified and weeping, before the darkness swallowed him whole. The darkness was not empty. It was filled with the sensation of water, warm and viscous, holding him in a suspension that felt like being back in the womb. There was no pain. That was the first thing Jace noticed when his mind began to claw its way back to the surface. The crushing weight that had slammed into his chest in the throne room was gone. The fire in his nerves had been extinguished. He opened his eyes. He was floating in a vertical cylinder of translucent glass, submerged in a fluid that glowed with a soft, bioluminescent blue. Outside the glass, the room was dim, quiet, and peaceful. It smelled of ozone and crushed mint. The fluid drained away with a rushing sound, lowering him gently to the floor of the tank. The glass slid open. Jace stumbled forward, coughing, his lungs adjusting to the air. Hands caught him before he could fall. He looked down at himself. He was naked, but his body was not the same as it had been. Across his chest, radiating out from where the Regent's energy bolt had struck him, was a network of faint, glowing blue lines. They traced the path of his ribs and wove across his heart like a second circulatory system. The alien biotech had not just stitched him back together, it had become part of him. He was a kintsugi vessel, repaired with gold, or in this case, with light. "You are awake." The voice was rough, trembling. Jace looked up. Alira was sitting in a chair beside the tank. She looked terrible, which was to say, she looked more beautiful than he had ever seen her. Her ceremonial robes were wrinkled and stained with soot. Her hair, usually an intricate sculpture of braids and gems, hung loose around her shoulders. The iridescent markings on her skin were dim, fading in and out with her exhaustion. She looked at him as if she were seeing a ghost. "Jace," she whispered. She stood up, her legs unsteady, and reached for him. Jace met her halfway, wrapping his arms around her. She felt solid. She felt real. She buried her face in the crook of his neck, and he could feel the wet heat of her tears against his skin. "I thought I lost you," she choked out. "The medics. They said your heart stopped twice. They had to use the royal reserves, the nanotech usually reserved for the bloodline." Jace ran a hand down her back, soothing her. "It takes more than a cranky old man with a laser pointer to keep me down." "Princess." He pulled back to look at her. Her eyes were red-rimmed, searching his face for any sign of the man she knew, fearful that the technology might have changed him. Alira took his hand. She looked at the glowing blue lines on his chest, tracing them with a hesitant finger. "You carried the mark of my world now," she said softly. "You can never truly leave." She took a deep breath, steeling herself. She looked into his eyes, her expression shifting from relief to a terrified vulnerability. "In the throne room," she said, her voice shaking. "I told the court that I claimed you. I invoked the right, but I do not want a possession. Jace, I never did." She squeezed his hand, her grip tight, desperate. "You are mine forever," she whispered, repeating the words that had started it all. But then she added the amendment that changed everything. "If you will still have me." The room was silent. Jace looked at her. He saw the woman who had stood alone against an empire. He saw the woman who had learned to laugh at his terrible jokes. He saw the partner who had fought back to back with him against stone giants. He smiled, and it was a genuine bone-deep smile that reached his eyes. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing the knuckles. "I will only accept on one condition," Jace said. Illyra blinked, bracing herself. "A condition?" Jace leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "I am yours," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "If you are mine." Illyra let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She nodded against him. "It is a deal, human." The coronation was not a ceremony of tradition. It was a revolution broadcast live. 3 days later, the grand hall was packed. But this time, the hovering platforms were not just filled with nobles in silk. There were representatives from the Undercity, leaders of the casteless, and even holographic projections of the colony worlds. Jace stood on the high balcony, hidden from the direct view of the cameras, with Leo standing on a crate beside him to see over the railing. "Look at her." "Dad," Leo whispered. "She looks like a star." Illyra stood on the central dais. She was not wearing the heavy, stifling robes of her ancestors. She wore a sleek tunic of white and silver, practical and commanding. The crown hovered inches above her head, a ring of pure light. She spoke without a script. "For too long, we have been asleep," Illyra's voice rang out, amplified across the city. "We let a machine dictate our morality. We let fear dictate our borders. We sacrificed our own people on the altar of a false necessity." She gestured to the empty space where the Oracle's interface used to be. "The machine cult is dismantled. The Oracle has been restricted to a computational role. It will calculate harvest yields and weather patterns, but it will never again calculate the value of a life." A roar of approval went up from the crowd, shaking the crystal spires. "And," Illyra continued, raising her hand for silence, "we must address the ancient laws that bind us. The right of possession." She looked up, her gaze finding the balcony where Jace stood in the shadows. "No sentient being should belong to another," she declared. "We are not objects. We are not tools. From this day forward, the right of binding is abolished. All partnerships must be chosen freely, or they are void." The silence that followed was heavy, stunned. She was tearing down the bedrock of their social structure. Then, a single cheer rose from the casteless section, then another. Then the guards joined in, banging their spears against the floor. "She did it," Jace whispered, feeling a swell of pride that felt dangerously like his heart expanding too fast for his ribs. She actually did it. The diplomatic ship, the UNS Horizon, arrived a week later. It was a blocky, ugly, beautiful piece of human engineering, painted in stark white and blue. Jace sat in a conference room in the newly established embassy wing. Across from him sat Ambassador Wu, a stern woman with gray hair and a datapad. "Mr. Reynolds," Ambassador Wu said, sliding the pad across the table. "We have reviewed your file. Your actions here have complicated things, but they have also opened a door we have been banging on for 50 years. You are a hero back home, Jace." She tapped the screen. "We have authorized a full pardon for your debt. We have a position waiting for you at the Flight Academy in Geneva, and for your son." She brought up a new file, full scholarship to the Sagan Institute, room, board, top-tier education. He will grow up with kids his own age. He will play baseball. He will see the ocean. It is everything you wrote in your logs that you wanted for him. Jace looked at the images on the screen. Green grass, blue sky, no violet trees, no singing insects, no political assassinations. It was the life he had dreamed of every night for 5 years. It was safety. It was normal. "The shuttle leaves in 48 hours, the ambassador said. "We would like you on it." Jace stared at the datapad. He traced the outline of Earth with his thumb. "Thank you, Ambassador," Jace said quietly. "I have a lot to think about." The royal gardens were quiet in the evening. The singing plants were humming a low, lullaby melody, soft tones of lavender and indigo floating in the air. Jace walked the winding path with Leo. Leo was kicking a pebble, his hands deep in the pockets of his new tunic. "So," Jace said, breaking the silence, "that lady today, she said we can go back to Earth." Leo stopped kicking the pebble. He did not look up. "We would have a house," Jace continued, trying to sell it to himself as much as to the boy. "Real grass. You could go to a real school. You would not have to eat blue jelly for dinner anymore." Leo looked at a glowing flower, watching a moth the size of a dinner plate land on it. "Do I have to go?" Leo asked. "No," Jace said immediately, crouching down to be eye level with him. "No, buddy. We decide together. We are a team." Leo looked at him. His eyes were old for a 7-year-old. They had seen vacuum exposure and prison cells. "I do not remember Earth," Leo admitted. "I remember the ship. I remember being cold." He gestured around the garden. "Here, it is warm. The trees sing, and I like the food." He looked down at his feet, then back at Jace. "And I like Alira. Dad, she listens to me. She does not treat me like I am just luggage. She asked me how the ventilation shafts worked. She said I was brave." Jace felt a lump in his throat. "She thinks you are very brave," Jace managed to say. "I feel real here," Leo said, struggling to find the words. "On the ship, we were just floating. Here, you fought the bad guys. You saved everyone. You are not just a pilot here, Dad. You are... you..." Leo stepped forward and hugged Jace around the neck. "I do not want to go back to being invisible." Jace held him tight. He realized with a sudden clarity that hit him like a lightning bolt that he had been holding on to the idea of Earth as a sanctuary. But a sanctuary was just a place where you were safe. A home was a place where you mattered. "Okay," Jace whispered into Leo's hair. "Okay, Ace, message received." Jace found Alira on the highest balcony of the central spire. She was leaning against the railing, looking out over the city. The view had changed. Construction drones swarmed like fireflies around the lower levels. New bridges were being grown to connect the noble districts with the worker levels. Embassies were rising. It was a city waking up from a long, bad dream. Jace joined her at the railing. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just watched the lights. "The ambassador made you an offer," Alira said. She did not look at him. Her voice was carefully neutral, stripping away all emotion. "She did," Jace replied. "Full pardon, job at the academy, a normal life for Leo." Alira's knuckles turned white as she gripped the stone railing. "You should take it," she said. Jace turned to look at her. "Excuse me?" "You should go," Alira said, turning to face him. Her eyes were shimmering, but she held her chin high. "This world is dangerous. Jace, we are rebuilding, but there will be other threats. The loyalists are gone, but the politics will remain. It is not a place for a child. And you never asked for this. You crashed here. You were a prisoner." She took a shaky breath. "I love you, Jace. I love you enough to want you to be happy. Even if that happiness is 1,000 light years away from me." Jace watched her. He saw the heartbreak in her eyes, warring with her fierce resolve to do the right thing by him. In the past, her love, or what she thought was love, had been about possession. "You are mine." It was about safety, control, binding. But now, she was opening the cage door. She was breaking her own heart to give him the one thing she had never had. A choice. That was the moment. That was the proof. Jace stepped closer. He reached out and took her hands, prying them off the railing. "You are terrible at sales pitches, you know that," Jace said softly. Alira blinked, a tear escaping and tracking through the gold markings on her cheek. "I am trying to be noble. Jace, do not ruin it. I am not going anywhere." "Alira," she froze. "But the scholarship, the safety." "Leo thinks Earth sounds boring," Jace said, smiling. "He says the trees do not sing there. And he says he likes the Queen because she knows how to listen." Alira let out a gasp, her composure cracking. "And me?" Jace continued, stepping into her space, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I realized something. I spent 5 years running away from the ghost of my life. I was just surviving." He rested his forehead against hers. "I do not want to survive anymore. I want to build something. And I want to build it with you. Not as your possession, not as your pet, as my partner," Alira whispered. "As your partner." Jace confirmed. "As your advisor? As the guy who tells you when you are being too dramatic?" He pulled back to look her in the eye. "But we need ground rules," Alira sniffed, wiping her eyes, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Ground rules? Rule 1, Jace said. No more executing people who annoy us." Alira laughed, a wet, breathless sound. "Agreed. Rule 2, Jace said. Honest communication. If I am being a stubborn human, you tell me. If you are being an imperious royal, I tell you." "Agreed," Alira said. "Rule 3, Jace said, his voice dropping lower. "Leo is part of the package. We are a family unit. You, me, the kid." Alira looked at him with such intense affection it almost knocked him over. "I would have it no other way," she said. "I have already commissioned a small uniform for him. He is to be the Royal Minister of Ventilation Shaft Safety." Jace chuckled. "He is going to let that go to his head." "And Rule 4? Alira asked, leaning in closer. "Rule 4, Jace said, closing the distance. We rewrite the etiquette. No more bowing, and definitely no more mating dances unless I specifically request them." Alira smirked. "I will make a note in the royal decree. Messy human affection is henceforth permitted in the council chambers." She kissed him then. It was soft, unhurried, and filled with the promise of 1,000 tomorrows. It was the kiss of two people who had nothing left to hide. The final diplomatic summit took place a month later. The new council chamber was an architectural marvel, blending the organic crystal of the alien world with the functional steel and glass of human design. On one side of the table sat the human coalition envoys, looking crisp and military in their dress blues. On the other side sat the new planetary council, a mix of high-born nobles and rough-looking labor leaders from the Undercity. At the head of the table stood Alira. She looked regal, but approachable. And standing right beside her, not behind her, was Jace. He wore a fusion of styles, a human dress uniform jacket over an alien tunic woven from spider silk. The glowing blue lines on his neck were visible above the collar, marking him as a child of two worlds. "We are not just signing a trade agreement today," Alira addressed the room. "We are signing a promise that difference is not a cause for war, but a catalyst for strength." Jace watched the humans and aliens nodding, talking, shaking hands. He caught the eye of Ambassador Wu, who gave him a small, respectful nod. He looked down at his datapad. There was a message from Leo, who was currently in the royal school. "Dad, can I bring a friend to dinner? He has 6 arms. He is cool." Jace smiled. He typed back, Only if he washes all 6 hands. He looked up to find Alira watching him. She wasn't paying attention to the treaty. She was looking at him with a look of pure, unadulterated belonging. She reached under the table and took his hand. He squeezed back. They were a legend now, the pilot and the princess. The story was whispered in the barracks of human ships and sung in the crystal plazas of the city. It was a story about how a crash landing became a homecoming. The night air was cool and sweet. The diplomatic reception was over. The guests had departed. The palace was quiet. Jace and Alira stood on the private balcony of their shared quarters. Leo was asleep in the room behind them, exhausted after a day of adventures with his new 6-armed best friend. Above them, the 2 moons hung in the sky, the white crescent and the red sphere, distinct and different, yet sharing the same orbit, pulling on the tides together, and below them, the spaceport was active. New starships were rising on pillars of blue fire, heading out into the galaxy. But they weren't warships. They were explorers, traders, messengers. They looked like glowing birds migrating home. Alira leaned against Jace's side. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her into his warmth. She rested her head on his chest, right over the glowing lines that marked where her technology kept his heart beating. "It is a good view," Jace murmured. "It is a better future," Alira corrected softly. She turned in his arms, looking up at him. The moonlight caught the gold flecks in her eyes and the iridescent shimmer of her skin. She looked ageless and young all at once. She reached up and touched his face, her thumb brushing his cheek. She smiled, a playful, knowing smile that harked back to the moment she had saved his life in the throne room. "You are mine forever, human," she murmured. Jace smiled back. He leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. "And you are mine," he replied. They stood there as the stars wheeled overhead, 2 lonely souls who had crashed into each other and built a world from the wreckage. They watched the ships rise, secure in the knowledge that for the first time in both their lives they didn't need to run. They were already home.